Part 30. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 301. The closed metal door began to rise, and Texas walked into the not spacious airborne pod, accompanied by several soldiers wearing black metal armor. Of course, in order to prevent any accidents from the Angel allies, Hizui and Jingnan were also in this orbital drop cabin. After standing in position according to the instructions, lower the metal fixing bracket above the head, and close the front and back to fix Hakui and Jingnan in position. Hizui vomited to Jingnan, "I feel like it would be more convenient to sit on this thing and rush in directly from the atmosphere." Texas, who was in the previous position, said, "How can we reach the ground quickly if we don't sit here? Even if I can jump from outer space, the soldiers under my command can't. And how do you angels carry out atmospheric entry operations?" Faced with the problem in Texas, Hizui didn't want to deal with this guy very much. Jingnan on the side had no choice but to explain. "Our warriors from the Angel civilization have the ability to travel through the atmosphere alone under the protection of their battle armor, so we don't need any assistance to carry out operations that break into the atmosphere." After saying that, Jingnan nodded politely. Texas looked at the folded wings behind Hizui and Jingnan and suddenly realized. "That's right. Having wings is more convenient than us who can only run on the ground." At this moment, the airdrop warehouse began to broadcast voice information, and there was a slight tremor, and it seemed to be moving. "Please note that airdrop pod pilots and soldiers on board are about to launch airdrop pods from warships. Please be prepared to withstand the impact." On the belly of the space battleship floating outside the atmosphere, closed metal plates opened to both sides. Then, like firing cannonballs, hexagonal orbital drop pods were launched from it. Hizui and Jingnan, who were sitting in the airdrop cabin, only felt a tremor under their feet, followed by violent tremors coming from all directions in the airdrop cabin. The two warships launched a total of more than 100 airdrop pods, which fell to the surface like more than 100 launched orbital bombardment shells. An hour ago, on the surface of Kesar, the front line of defense of the Kamigawa civilization was visible. Boom! The soil sputtered high, and the intensive roar of artillery fire did not stop for a moment. Behind the bunker made of metal, there were soldiers wearing light black exoskeleton armor. The firearms in their hands were placed on the bunker and sprayed out rounds. Large caliber bullets. Hundreds of meters away, a large number of beast-like soldiers of the Shima civilization were rushing towards them. Even if they were blown away by the heavy firepower from the rear of the Kamigawa civilization, they were not afraid at all. Caliber firearms, tilting their firepower towards the warriors of the Kamigawa civilization on the opposite side. Amoran's slender figure was very inconspicuous in this battlefield filled with bullets. She slid to the ground and passed through an area where the bunker had been blown down. Not paying attention to the ordinary Kamigawa soldiers lying in a pool of blood beside him, he stood up and knelt on the ground. The half-folded sniper rifle in his hand, which was originally easy to transfer, unfolded, and the muzzle pointed in the direction of the rushing Shima soldiers. The special scope immediately zoomed in on the screen and automatically searched for high-value targets in the field of vision. As for the ordinary Shima beast soldiers wearing metal armor, they were all ignored. In less than 2 seconds, Amoran spotted the enemy's elite through the sniper rifle in his hand. A Sabata beast warrior with a lizard-like head and only his abdomen wearing armor, who was a bit taller than the surrounding Shima soldiers, was raising the long blade in his hand forward, urging the surrounding beast soldiers to charge. Amoran's eyes lit up slightly behind the goggles of his helmet. He completed the ballistic calculation in his mind in an instant. He then moved the muzzle of the gun slightly and confidently pulled the trigger. As the sniper gun in his hand vibrated slightly, the muzzle sprayed out a fine shot of silver. Long bullet. A few hundred meters away, a Sabata beast warrior was furiously urging the surrounding Shima soldiers to charge, and at the same time he was also moving forward with his claws. But the next moment, The Sabata Beast Warrior, who was a junior officer in the Beast Army, spurted blood from his forehead. His whole body flew backwards several meters and fell to the ground. His body twitched a few times and then stopped moving. I saw that his left eye had disappeared, leaving only a hole the same size as the eye socket. As for the brain inside, it had long been turned into paste by the specially prepared bullets. Ran spit out the number 62 in his mouth and immediately retracted behind the bunker. The sniper rifle in his hand was automatically loaded. Then he stuck his head out again, paused and then pulled the trigger. He only heard the sound of a gunshot, and another person in the distance. The Sabata Beast Warrior's eye socket was punched through and he fell to the ground softly. The mission of Ran and his Kamigawa sniper team on this battlefield is to snipe the Sabata Beast Warriors. This kind of beast warrior with a lizard-like head is very powerful in combat. Ordinary Kamigawa soldiers often need several people to focus their fire to kill them. They are like the heavy infantry of the beast body civilization and are also grassroots commanders. They can often force them to kill. Rush to the position carrying conventional firepower. And as long as these war-loving Sabata warriors get close, the fate that awaits ordinary Kamigawa warriors is to be massacred. A Sabata warrior from the rear of the beast civilization army ran towards a strong figure wearing silver-gray metal heavy armor who was sitting on a stone in front of a hill. When he was 10 meters away, he half knelt down and spoke in the universal language of beast bodies. Road. General, the enemy's snipers have been killing my compatriots. Without grassroots command, it is difficult for us to organize an effective attack. Now all our soldiers are suppressed in place and engage in long-distance firefights with the Kamigawa people. The figure sitting on the stone did not reply, but stood up. His height was not as high as the Sabata warrior who was half kneeling on the ground. However, the Sabata warrior lowered his head, as if he was afraid of this figure. No need to trouble you, I will personally lead the attack. This beast warrior, who is called a general by the beast warriors, is a Tianding star. Because of their powerful and ferocious fighting power, Tianding stars generally serve as commanders of the beast-shaped civilized armies. The Sabata warrior who was half kneeling on the ground breathed a sigh of relief. At least he no longer had to be punished for failing to do things well. General Kunta, please let us follow you to destroy the Kamigawa people's defenses. Kunta took the helmet handed to him by his men and put it on his head. He picked up the giant sword stuck on the ground and nodded in agreement to the personal guard who asked him. At this time, the small hill that had been serving as the background behind Kunta suddenly moved, and a pair of huge eyes revealing a violent meaning slowly opened. Ran, who picked up the sniper rifle and changed his position, stood up again and prepared to find the target, but was stunned because the animal-shaped civilized army stopped charging and began to retreat backwards. Seeing this, Ran put down his gun. Most of the Shenhe soldiers on the front line below had ceased fire. Only a small number of red-eyed soldiers and artillery fire from the rear were still bombarding some people. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 302. Taking advantage of the time when the beast civilization retreated and stopped attacking, the soldiers of the Kamigawa civilization ignored the surrounding environment and sat down against the nearest metal bunker. They panted heavily on the smoke-filled battlefield and began to rest to recover from their mental and physical exertion. While the main combatants were resting, automated supply machines entered the position from the rear and began to collect the remains of the fallen soldiers, while leaving ammunition supplies throughout the position. Ran also carried his favorite gun and passed by the corpses of fallen soldiers on the road, and came to the gathering place of his team. After discovering that no one in the team was injured or killed, the sadness in his heart was finally diluted a little. As qualified candidates for the Kamigawa Sniper Super Gene, Ran and the members of her team specialize in long-range sniping and killing of enemy grassroots elite command units behind the forward positions. They are much safer than front-line soldiers who face the hail of bullets from beast-shaped warriors. Just when Ammo-ran and his team were converging to replenish their ammunition, a Kamigawa soldier ran over. Captain Ammo-ran, our brothers on the front line have suffered many casualties, and many of them need to be sent to the rear for treatment. Our captain asked me to ask when we can get some time to rest. Ammo-ran looked at the young soldier whose face was blackened by gunpowder smoke and whose light exoskeleton was covered with several scratches. He did not answer immediately but pressed the side of his helmet and began to call the base behind him. This is the front line position, Ammo-ran, call the base now. This is the base, what can I do, Captain Ammo-ran? I just want to ask when the reinforcements you mentioned will arrive. The beast's offensive is very fierce, and the ordinary soldiers on the front line have suffered heavy casualties. They are not super soldiers. They have been fighting for more than 20 hours continuously and cannot last long. After a pause, another part of the communication responded. The reinforcements have arrived at Kaysar and are now preparing for orbital airdrop. You just need to hold on for a while and the reinforcements will arrive. When Ammo-ran turned around and was about to answer, her eyes inadvertently scanned the sky and her pupils suddenly tightened. As a Kamigawa sniper, her supervision allowed her to see something unusual in the air. Did your detection system detect a big bird, an extra large one? Captain Ammo-ran, what are you talking about? Our detection system didn't detect anything in the air. Hearing this, Ammo-ran quickly shouted, tell your commander quickly, there is something in the sky flying towards the base. At this moment, in the Kamigawa base in the rear area, the correspondent was a little confused when he heard Ammo-ran's nervous shouting at the other end, but he still dutifully conveyed the words to his superiors in the command room. The middle-aged man wearing a simple military uniform standing on the high platform frowned and ordered to the operator in an area below. Check what's in the sky. The target may have the ability to block detection. This base is actually a simple modular defense position, with more than 20 twin-mounted railguns located inside to provide long-range heavy fire support to front-line positions. The reason why the railgun uses physical shells is also a helpless choice. The beast warriors are physically strong and have close-fitting armor. Unless the energy attack hits the target, it is difficult for the impact of the explosion to cause large-scale effective damage. This is still a large energy weapon. Small ones can only open a small hole in the body of a beast warrior, or can only burn their skin and muscles. Therefore, except for a small number of troops who are keen on close combat, the warriors of the Kamigawa civilization have almost all been equipped with high kinetic live ammunition weapons. At the very least, live ammunition weapons will produce huge kinetic energy shrapnel and shock waves after explosion. Coupled with special high flammability agents, the ultra-high temperature generated at the moment of explosion will directly scorch the beast warriors within its range. The real reason is that physical weapons are more suitable in the atmosphere and have certain lethality against high-level beast warriors. The operator first inspected an area of hundreds of kilometers around the base, but did not find any suspicious targets. At this moment, the operator responsible for the trajectory calculation of the railgun suddenly shouted, "There is something approaching us rapidly in the air." High above the outside world, a giant creature with a sharp curved beak, a pair of thick claws, and a wingspan of more than 200 meters was swooping down from the sky at high speed. The shriek tore through the air, even from thousands of meters away. The orbital gun barrel that was originally slightly raised began to rise rapidly, but at this time, the giant beast swooping down from the sky was extremely close to the base below. Boom! Several twin-mounted orbital cannons ejected long fire snakes from their muzzles, and several red lotuses of destruction exploded on the flying behemoth that rushed towards them. A wail of pain came out, and the railgun continued to fire. The flying behemoth that originally rushed towards a turret seemed to be unable to withstand the firepower of the railgun, and began to change its flight trajectory, and finally smashed into the center of the base. The ground shook like an earthquake. After the shaking subsided, the two orbital turrets located on the dive track of the flying beast twisted and fell to the side. The ground, which was originally made of metal, was smashed by the beast into a dent of hundreds of meters. However, due to the thick smoke, the Kamigawa soldiers stationed at the base could not see clearly whether the giant beast in the pit was dead. Dozens of soldiers holding firearms slowly approached the pit, and the communications squadron leader said, "Be careful, approach slowly, and fire immediately if there is any situation." Suddenly the thick smoke rolled violently, and a huge shadow rose inside. Then orange-red viscous flames spurted out from the thick smoke, covering an area of dozens of meters in radius in a fan shape. The terrifying temperature immediately caused the metal to show signs of melting, and the Kamigawa soldiers in the flames didn't even have time to scream, and the armor on their bodies melted into a magma-like liquid. Then a strong wind blew away the thick smoke in the pit, and the giant beast with wings leaned down. There were armor plates like barbs growing on its back, and in the gaps between the armor plates was the body of a famous beast. Civilized soldier. The leader among them was Kunta, a Tianding star who had previously decided to lead the attack in person. It turned out that the attack he was referring to was not an attack on the front line positions, but a sneak attack from the air on the Shenhe base in the rear, destroying their heavy firepower advantage. The situation on the front line was not optimistic at this moment. After Emoran saw a flying giant beast in the sky, the troops of the animal civilization launched another attack. However, this time, Emoran's position did not have heavy fire support from the rear, and soon the animal civilization broke into within 100 meters of the forward position. Emoran called the base to request heavy fire support, but was told that the base was attacked by a beast-like civilization and could not provide support at all. She was so angry that she cursed. Without the support of heavy firepower, the defending soldiers suffered heavy casualties for a while, and some areas were even broken into by beast warriors. The two sides launched a brutal hand-to-hand battle. Emoran no longer carried out precise sniping, but quickly pulled the trigger of his favorite gun and shot the approaching beast warrior. "You all die!" The two Kamigawa soldiers roared and fired forward, one after another with highly penetrating bullets killing the beast warriors who tried to rush into the position. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 303. The Shima soldier roared an unknown language, and his chest armor was penetrated, splattering with blood. The bullets that rolled randomly after being injected into the body even messed up his internal organs. But even so, these war-loving Shima soldiers will continue to charge until their bodies have no strength left. What the hell, these bastards can't be killed at all. A soldier shouted, and a more senior soldier on the side quickly shouted, "Watch out for their attacks. Don't get distracted." As soon as the veteran finished speaking, a soldier's gun misfired and fired all the bullets. He shouted, "Reload." But just as he was changing the bullet, the sound of breaking wind came. A flying axe with a glowing red blade whirled and shot out, slicing into the chest of the reloading soldier. Like a signal, more and more soldiers were killed by the throwing axes thrown by Shima soldiers. As the firepower weakened, some beast-shaped soldiers gradually broke through the firepower and entered the position and fired in all directions. After firing the bullets, they threw the gun and held the short-handled axe at their waist to slash at the Kamigawa soldiers who were close at hand. Emoran kept firing to save the Kamigawa soldiers below, and every bullet could accurately penetrate an enemy's head. But suddenly there were heavy footsteps coming from the side, and several Shima soldiers rushed to the surroundings at some point. Two of them threw the thermal energy battle axe in their hands towards Emoran. Emoran immediately rolled away, stood up, and immediately turned the gun and pulled the trigger, and immediately an enemy's head exploded. Such a bloody scene did not frighten the other Shima soldiers, but instead roared and rushed towards Emoran. But it was useless. After hearing a few gunshots, Several Shima soldiers who rushed over fell in a pool of blood. Amoran pointed his beloved gun downward again and whispered, "If you have a gun, don't use it. What a bunch of useless people, brain guy." But Amoran's brows furrowed at the next moment, because Sabata, who symbolized the backbone of the animal civilization army, also entered the position. About 3 meters tall, they are like little giants. Coupled with their powerful bodies that can ignore certain conventional fire strikes, they are like no one in the chaotic position, killing Kamigawa soldiers. Amoran couldn't help but frown, and concentrated on aiming at the heads of Sabata, who seemed to be quite big but very agile in movement, and looked for the right opportunity to pull the trigger and kill them with headshots. While Amoran and the Kamigawa soldiers on the position were struggling to hold on, a huge roar suddenly came from the sky, and objects trailing flames fell downwards. Amoran, who was still in a relatively safe situation, raised her head slightly and showed a hint of joy, because she recognized what it was. One after another, the orbital drop pods hit hard in front of the Kamigawa civilization's position, and the impact blew away the Shima soldiers within a few meters of radius. Because of this sudden movement, some of the beast warriors and Kamigawa soldiers who were fighting stopped. The next moment, the Kamigawa soldiers shouted excitedly, "Reinforcements! It's reinforcements!" Just as some Kamigawa soldiers shouted excitedly, there was a roar and the door of the orbital drop cabin flew out and knocked away several beast warriors. Then a figure wearing heavy black armor and holding a ferocious large single-edged axe walked out. "Bastards! You all deserve to die." Texas roared out these words, then jumped forward and jumped dozens of meters in the air. The single-edged axe raised in his hand lit up with a slightly dazzling scorching light, and then he moved toward a place where the beast warriors were densely packed. Area falls. There was just a roar, as if the earth was shaking, and a burst of light orange-red energy exploded in a semicircle. The beast-like warriors in an area of more than 10 meters around the Texas landing point were blown away while dancing. It reached an altitude of more than 10 meters. After the dust and smoke gradually settled, Texas stood in the middle of a pit of more than 10 meters, with a crack extending more than 20 meters in front of his body. Texas's blow was like pouring cold water on the heads of the beast warriors present, because only the gods they believed in could do this kind of destructive power. At this time, soldiers rushed out of the orbital drop cabin one after another and exchanged fire with the surrounding beast-shaped soldiers. Among them, the soldiers carrying big swords slaughtered the surrounding Shima soldiers like cutting wheat. Only Sabata can fight with these super warriors wearing light armor and holding big swords. Angel Hezui looked at the battlefield in front of him, slightly sticking out his tongue to moisten his lips, and said excitedly, "Such a grand scene is rare, I'm going to enjoy the fun of killing first." Before Jingnan could say anything, He-Chai flew forward close to the ground, like a sharp sword striking forward. Neither the Shima soldiers nor Sabata were able to stop Heke, who charged forward with a silver broad-blade sword. Everywhere he passed, there were beast-like soldiers who were cut in half or had their heads cut off, including soldiers like its Sabata from Little Giant. He-Chai didn't stop approaching until he was hundreds of meters away. He turned on the spot and was swept by the sword. All the Shima soldiers in the surrounding circle had their heads chopped off. In the rain of splattered blood was He-Chui's blood-free figure and his waist-length silver hair that fluttered with his body movements. He flapped his wings and rose into the air several meters high. Hezui shook the sword in his hand to throw away all the bright red blood stained on it, and said contemptuously to the surrounding Shima soldiers, "You are really weak. This level is not even as good as an ordinary male angel. Jingnan is not as aggressive as Hezui, but holding the flaming sword, she is not slow in killing enemies. Each sword swing can basically kill a Shima soldier, while silently measuring the normality of the beast's body in her heart. The fighting ability of a warrior. Ordinary soldiers of the Shima civilization have much weaker combat power than male angels. Even a single generation of warriors can easily deal with several of them. However, they have strong vitality. It is recommended to attack the head. Jingnan kicked away a Shima soldier who had been pierced through the chest by the flaming sword but was still moving and wanted to fight back, and then turned sideways to avoid a giant blade that was slashed down. At some point, a Sabata who was almost as tall as two Jingnan rushed over, his brown vertical pupils glowing with a cruel cold light. This Sabata opened its lizard-like upper and lower jaws and let out a deafening roar. He raised the giant blade in his hand and made a sweeping sweep. Jingnan leaned back and tried his best to avoid the sweeping giant blade. At the same time, he flipped his body in the air and hit his whip leg to send Sabata flying away. Sabata flew out and knocked away two Shima soldiers. After somersaulting on the ground, he shook his head and got up, but nothing happened. He even roared angrily at Jingnan. Jingnan's brows frowned slightly behind her mask, but she was fine. Although the whip leg she had just struck was not at full strength, it still had 6 points of strength. You must know that she is a second-generation angel, not a first-generation angel. Seeing the Sabata roaring and charging towards him with a giant sword in his hand, Jingnan did not choose to avoid the sword this time and rushed towards him. The crisp sound of gold and iron clashing was heard, and Sabata, who raised his sword to strike, flew backwards, with a clearly visible gap in the giant blade in his hand. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 304. Jingnan was only slightly shaken by the recoil force, and then flapped his wings to swoop forward. In an instant, he was above Sabata who fell to the ground. He opened his palm and moved his fingertips down to the hilt of the sword. The flaming sword used the palm of your hand as the center to rotate half a circle and stab downward with an underhand grip. Poof! The sharp sword tip pierced through Sabata's eye socket and half of it was submerged in it. Below the mirror, Sabata's body twitched a few times, and the giant blade that had just been raised fell to the ground again with a clang. At this moment, the orbiting Kamigawa troops and the beast army were mixed together, and the scene was extremely chaotic. However, because there were many super soldiers in the troops under Texas command, they quickly established a foothold in the beast army. It was clear that the Kamigawa troops were surrounded by the beast army, but under the leadership of Texas, who was wielding a tomahawk, it was as if they had surrounded the beast army present. The silver-gray sword clanged to block a giant blade that was slashing down from Sabata's hand. A Kamigawa blade gene-qualified person roared and raised his shoulders with force, pushing away the giant blade that was pressing on the giant sword. After the Kamigawa warblade completed the above actions, the hands holding the sword dropped and the flat blade was pushed forward. The tip of the sword pierced the armor on Sabata's abdomen. It did not pierce immediately, but instead pushed the tall Sabata back at a high speed. It wasn't until Sabata was tripped to the ground that the Kamigawa blade successfully sent the giant sword into his body, but it was obvious that just stabbing through the abdomen would not make him lose the ability to fight back. The next moment, the Kamigawa war blade was knocked away by the giant blade in Sabata's right hand. The Sabata stood up again, grasped the giant sword stuck in his abdomen, roared in pain, pulled it out and threw it behind his back, then rushed towards the Kamigawa warblade who lost his weapon. Kamigawa warblade had just gotten up from the ground, and when he raised his head and saw this scene, he subconsciously rolled aside hastily. The ground where he was just now was slashed with a gap of more than 2 meters long by the giant blade in Sabata's hand. Just when Sabata was about to pursue the victory, a silver figure suddenly passed by. The Kamigawa warblade, who was about to continue rolling to dodge, was a little dazed, because the place where the Sabata's head used to be in front of him was now empty. Hizui didn't care if the Kamigawa warblade could hear her words, so he said lightly, "You're welcome." After saying that, Heike's figure shuttled between the Shima soldiers and Sabata below, staining the ground with blood wherever he went. Combined with the high-speed maneuverability and the silver broad-blade sword, a specially designed flame-level weapon in Tsurui's hand, its killing efficiency exceeded that of everyone present, including the god of war Kamigawa. If Tsurui's super-speed attack and killing were to be said, it would make people think that she is the goddess of death who harvests life. Texas on the other side is completely different. He is unstoppable when wielding the tomahawk, and nothing in front of him can withstand the power of his axe. As long as the tall Sabata or Shima soldiers dared to stand on the path of Texas' advance, they would be chopped into 2 pieces of meat by the tomahawk in the next moment. This kind of enemy that is approaching you step by step and that you can't resist will extremely dampen the fighting spirit in the hearts of the beast warriors. Texas was like a flag on the battlefield, advancing step by step. Some Shima soldiers were afraid of being killed. Instead of rushing forward to fight hand to hand, they raised their guns and fired from a long distance. Texas raised his left arm to block the bullet that hit his cheek. His right arm dragged a single-edged axe and rushed towards the opponent. Every step he took made the soldiers who attacked Texas frightened. Finally, he saw the only sight in the eyes of these soldiers was the huge axe blade that seemed to be magnified dozens of times. Texas struck down with an axe, and its violent force penetrated deep into the surrounding ground. Large cracks appeared in a radius of several meters and a fan-shaped area of more than 10 meters in front. The beast warriors who were standing were all thrown away and fell heavily to the ground. Although they were not injured, a feeling of invincibility and fear arose spontaneously. The first frightened Shima soldier appeared. It stood up from the ground and shouted in horror in the universal language of beasts, "It is a god. It is the god of the Kamigawa people. We cannot fight against it. Only gods can fight against it, God." In the next second, the Shima soldier was slashed to death by Sabata, who was standing beside him. It roared loudly, "Cowardly people are not worthy of believing in the great Titan God." Texas's eyes narrowed when he saw this. The beast-shaped soldier was more tenacious than he expected. As the god of war in Kamigawa, his genetic model determines that his strength is at the absolute upper reaches even among gods, but there is only one thing. There is no large-scale attack method, and it is impossible to eliminate the large number of Shima soldiers on the battlefield in a short time. But these little minions can't even think of causing harm to him. If he had enough time, he could kill even a planet, let alone the battlefield. Seeing that the Shima soldiers who were originally in panic showed signs of regaining their morale under the roars of several sabotages, Texas felt that he could not continue to watch. The next moment he bent down slightly, Texas rushed forward, like a high-speed train. A large amount of earth and rocks were thrown up behind him. All the Shima soldiers blocking the road were hit with broken muscles and fractures, and were vomited. Bloody foam flew out. The Sabata who hacked the deserter to death before was no exception, and was turned into a mess by Texas. The Shima soldier, who had just suppressed his fear, could no longer suppress the fear welling up in his heart. He screamed in terror and ran in the direction he came from. More than half an hour had passed since the landing. Hichui found that the enemy showed no signs of decreasing, so he shook his wings and left the low altitude, inciting his wings to climb up to an altitude of 100 meters, giving a clear view of the situation below. After seeing the situation clearly, Hichui had made up her mind. Although she liked killing enemies, she did not like being killed by enemies on her own side. Although Binghua only sent her to collect the battle data of the beast warriors, she couldn't just watch her allies being killed and do nothing. According to the super warrior level of Kamigawa civilization, I should be considered a demigod. This is really an interesting title. Hizui thought silently in his heart, and at the same time secretly said, "Now let me show you how powerful the angel civilization demigods are." He raised the sword in his hand, and a scorching red halo circulated on it. Hizui closed his eyes and began to calculate various data in the atmosphere. At the same time, he reconstructed the energy-driving formula of stellar radiation energy based on the environment of Kaser. Fortunately, no one disturbed Hichui at this moment. After everything was done, Hichui opened his eyes again. "Let you see what color the punishment from heaven looks like." Hizui rushed almost straight towards an area below where Shima soldiers were densely packed. When she was still more than 10 meters away from the ground, She suddenly stopped and pointed the broad-edged sword with a dazzling red light in her hand towards throw it out. The next moment, there was a sudden silence in the air, a booming sound, and a small mushroom cloud rising up along with the expanding orange-red fire cloud. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 305. When the fire cloud subsided, the Shima soldiers within 100 meters disappeared, and the ground was scorched black by the high temperature, with dots of scorching light. When Texas in the distance saw this scene, his assessment of the angelic civilization's combat power improved a bit. Texas was confident that he could resist an attack of this magnitude without getting hurt, but an ordinary super soldier obviously couldn't. Angel's single soldier large-scale attack method is very convenient on the battlefield, especially on a large battlefield like this. I wonder if Space Teacher can exchange this technology from Angel. With the activation of super warriors such as Texas, Heikawi, Jingnan, Kamigawa Blade, Kamigawa Sniper, the Shima soldiers finally retreated after suffering heavy losses. It was not that the Shimash soldiers were afraid, but that the gods of the Kamigawa people were present, and if they did not retreat, the whole army would be annihilated. Heikawi descended from the air to Jingnan, who was standing there quietly, put the weapon in his hand into the wormhole and said, "What do you think when you see this scene? You are a warrior who later joined the Angel Legion. You should have never experienced such a large battlefield." Jingnan nodded, looking away from the dead Kamigawa soldiers, and then answered. "The only war I participated in was the one when Queen Kessa suppressed the male angels. At that time, I was following my sister to protect the gathering point of female angels in the royal city. At that time, those male angels rushed like crazy demons with crude weapons. Some sisters were soft-hearted." Jingnan paused and continued. "After that war, I was recommended to the queen by my sister and became her auxiliary officer." Chui raised his hand and patted Jingnan's shoulder armor, comforting him. "Relax, everything is over. I think your performance today can be regarded as a qualified angel warrior." Texas, who met and talked with Emoran for a while, learned that the base in the rear was attacked, and hurried back to his subordinates who were collecting the bodies of their comrades on the battlefield, and shouted, "All teams of Kamigawa glaives must assemble immediately." Soldiers wearing light full-body armor and carrying a giant sword who were originally scattered across the battlefield quickly ran over to assemble. Soon 52 Kamigawa war blades were assembled in front of Texas. Jingnan, not far away, remembered that when they arrived, a total of 60 Kamigawa war blades boarded the battleship. Texas looked at the upright Kamigawa blades standing in front of him, his eyes swept over some of them with wounds on their bodies, and then he said loudly, "Stay all the injured to assist Captain Emoran in guarding the base. The rest will board the orbital drop cabin again, and we will go support the base in the rear." No one questioned Texas's order because they believed in the decision of God of War Kamikawa. Soon a driver activated the airdrop pod that had sunk into the ground and drove over. There were 3 airdrop pods in total, each carrying 10 Kamigawa glaive and a Kamigawa sniper. Texas hesitated before boarding the airdrop pod, but finally walked up to Heikawi and Jingnan, revealing a group of tiny greetings. "Miss Heikawi, Miss Jingnan." Hizui crossed his arms across his chest and said nothing. Seeing this, Jingnan sighed secretly and opened his mouth to speak. "Texas, do you need help from our sisters for something? Just now I saw you gathering your subordinates there. Is this where you need to go to support?" Faced with Jingnan's inquiry, Texas was embarrassed and spoke. "Just before we landed, Emoran saw a giant flying beast flying toward the base behind. Now we have lost contact with the base and don't know what the situation is like there, so I want to lead a team to have a look. But as you have also seen, none of my subordinates can fly. They are sitting in airdrop pods with no counter-attack capability. I am afraid that something unexpected will happen midway. So I would like to ask the 2 angel ladies to escort us for a certain distance. Is that okay?" Jingnan looked at Hizui, who was aside, and saw that she had no objection and agreed. Yes, Heikui and I will escort you to your destination and ensure your safety during flight. 100 meters above the ground, Heikui and Jingnan flew to the left and right next to 3 hexagonal airborne landings. There was no problem at the beginning of the voyage, and Heikui and Jingnan started chatting, and the topic gradually moved closer to Texas. Jingnan, did you see Texas take action just now? I thought he was just a stupid guy at first, but I didn't expect him to be quite impressive in battle. Isn't it because he looks down on us as women and you don't want to talk to him? Why are you suddenly mentioning him again now? Jingnan was a little curious. Hizui was quite famous among angels. He was once the left-wing guard of King Tianji and a powerful battle angel who was invincible in high-level angel battle groups. Only a few angels could fight her resoundingly. Well, it's just because he is strong enough. Anyway, I am not his opponent. I think only Binghua and my sister can compete with him. Jingnan didn't care about Hizui calling the queen by her first name, but instead became interested in what she said. Is he really that strong? I can't see it at all. Of course you can't tell, but I was exposed to war decades earlier than you. Texan's strength shown in previous battles is very strong, and his control of power is not weak either. Although I am quite confident in my own strength, I am not blindly arrogant. If he and I really fight, I will most likely lose, but I am confident that I can escape. Hizui was very confident when he said this, while Jingnan took it to heart and prepared to go back and tell the queen. At the same time, he planned to pay more attention to Texas in the next time. At this moment, Hichui suddenly said, "That should be the base in front of you, right? But it seems to be on fire." Upon hearing this, Jingnan quickly focused his attention and looked forward, and saw a black spot in the distance getting bigger and bigger, with black smoke faintly rising. As the distance increased, the picture Jingnan saw became clearer and clearer. Orange-red flames were burning on a metal base with a range of several kilometers, and billowing black smoke swept into the sky. Texas in the orbital warehouse naturally saw the scene through the camera, just when the group was still a few hundred meters away from the burning base. Suddenly, a violent gust of wind came from above, and then a sharp scream reached everyone's ears, causing eardrums to hurt. Just as Jingnan was about to raise his head and look upward, he heard Hichui shouting, "Jingnan, be careful." When Jingnan heard this, she was startled. Just as she was about to make a move, a huge sharp claw came and grabbed it. She didn't even have time to dodge, and held it tightly. At the same time, an airdrop pod was also held by huge claws from above, and was crushed into twisted scrap metal on the spot. The birthdays of the Kamigawa blades inside were unknown. Jingnan gritted her teeth, and used her arms and legs to try with all her strength to open the huge claws holding her, but it was useless. An unshakable force began to crush her body. Hizui's blue eyes stared at the giant beast above them that was flying at the same speed as them. He didn't have the slightest fear in his heart. Instead, he was furious and shouted angrily at the flying giant beast with a wingspan of more than 200 meters above him. "Let go of Jingnan. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 306. The flying behemoth ignored Hichui's angry shouts at all. In its eyes, Hichui was as insignificant as an ant. With a chirp, the flying behemoth began to accelerate, and the frequency of its wings was accelerated by a notch. It grabbed Jingnan and an airborne landing pod with its sharp claws and gradually climbed to a high altitude, and soon disappeared into the thick clouds. Hizui didn't care that he was escorting Texas. He picked up his sword and followed him, diving into the clouds high in the sky. Texas was not in the drop cabin that was captured by the flying beast. At this moment, he roared loudly in the cabin. "Quickly lower the height, everyone will jump down in a moment, there may be an ambush here." The pilot of the airborne capsule quickly lowered the altitude, and soon reached an altitude of more than 20 meters away from the base, 100 meters away. Texas stood next to the open door of the airborne capsule and let the Kamigawa blade inside jump out first. A Kamigawa warblade landed on the ground and immediately became alert. The height of more than 20 meters was nothing to them. Even the Kamigawa sniper with a relatively fragile constitution could land safely without the help of his companions. Just when Texas was about to jump out, two black afterimages jumped from a distance of 100 meters and smashed the airborne capsule into pieces. Texas fell to the ground with the disintegrated airborne pod, and then a small mixed force of Sabata and Shima soldiers appeared not far away. Among them, the Shima soldiers raised their guns and shot toward Texas, and the position of his subordinates tilted and a wave of bullets rained down. Seeing this, the Kamigawa blades drew their giant swords from behind, and gathered their giant swords horizontally to block the vital points, forming a flesh and blood bunker to protect the three Kamigawa snipers behind them. And they did not disgrace their reputation as snipers, and quickly raised their sniper rifles. "Start hitting the headshots one by one." Texas got up from the ground and threw his battle axe in the direction of the small group of beast troops. Like a heavy howitzer, it stirred up dust several meters high and knocked away nearly 10 shooters. Shima soldiers. At this moment, two strong beast warriors from behind who were over 2 meters tall and wearing silver-gray metal heavy armor rushed into the gathered Kamigawa war blades. Fell in a pool of blood. Texas looked angry, clenching the thrown tomahawk in his fist and carrying it back. Then he roared and shook the surrounding dust, and rushed towards the two senior soldiers of the Animal Civilization Army. Kamigawa's division of the combat power of the Beast Body Civilization Army is simple and crude, that is, ordinary cannon fodder Shima soldiers, elite warriors Sabata, and advanced Beast Body warriors Tianding Stars, plus the so-called Titan Protoss. This corresponds to the first generation of Kamigawa civilization, warriors, second generation warriors, third generation warriors and war gods like Texas. These two Tianding people were Kunta's personal guards, and their assigned task was to disrupt the enemy's formation and bring the saboteurs close to the massacre. Kunta's tactic was very successful. He used the flying behemoth to destroy 1/3 of the enemy's supporting troops from the beginning. Although he did not expect that the enemy would have super soldiers with the ability to fly, they were already lured away by the flying behemoth. Not something to be afraid of for the time being. Although he lacked the assistance of the flying behemoth, this did not prevent him from ordering his men to carry out the following tactics. When the enemy landed, he had his personal guards destroy their aircraft, and then waited for an opportunity to outflank them from behind, while using Shima soldiers' long-range fire-covered Sabata's charge. However, the only thing Kunta missed was that among the Kamigawa troops coming to support, a Kamigawa war god would sneak in. You must know that this is not an important war zone, and there is no god to guard it. This is why Kunta, a general with a beast body, dares to go out. However, it is obvious that things are unpredictable. If you hunt geese all day long, you will eventually be pecked by geese and be blinded one day. Unfortunately, today may be the day when Kunta was blinded by a goose and kicked into an iron plate. During the charge, Texas used the single-edged axe in his hand as a flying axe and threw it at a Tianding star, while he rushed towards another enemy who broke into the Kamigawa war blade. When the Tianding star saw the enemy throwing the weapon, they excitedly prepared to hit it away. However, who knew that the flying battle axe carried a strange force that could not be resisted, knocking it away dozens of meters on the spot and crashing into the inner mound. Using the power of the charge, Texas raised his arm, jumped up slightly and struck the Tianding man with a right uppercut on the head as he raised his weapon to block, sinking him into the ground on the spot. "You go and deal with those minions, leave these two bastards to me." While speaking, Texas stretched out his hands to grab the left and right feet of the Tianding star who had been punched into the ground by his punch. He jumped into the air and spun twice before slamming down hard. Boom! A huge crater was made on the ground. Texas stretched out his right hand, and the tomahawk emerged from the wormhole, and he held it in his hand again. Kunta's bodyguard was thrown to pieces, and the last image that came to his mind was Texas raising the tomahawk above his head with both hands and chopping it down hard, and then fell into darkness. After receiving the order from Texas, the Kamigawa glaive troops immediately changed into a charge formation to face the saboteurs. The snipers hid according to the nearby terrain, waiting for opportunities to snipe enemies shooting from a distance. Texas picked up his blood-stained battle axe from the head of the Tianding star whose head was split in half at his feet, and turned to look at the Tianding star who was smashed into the mound by his flying axe before. Grinning slightly, his face looked very ferocious. The ear-piercing sound of wind passed by his ears. After he Chui passed through the clouds, he burst out at his fastest speed and chased the huge beast in sight. Amidst the roar, Heikawi finally caught up with it and reached the point where it was on par with it. However, facing such a huge size gap, Heikawi did not think of a way to stop it for the time being. This made Hizui feel a little at a loss. In the end, he could only grit his teeth and become a live doctor. He raised his hand and held the silver broad-blade sword, with a faint orange-red halo flowing on the sword. Chui swung in the air, and a several-meter-long orange flame sword energy flew out, hitting the side of the flying giant beast, causing a violent explosion. The flying behemoth screamed in pain, and its violent brown vertical pupils finally focused on Chui, the little bug that had been chasing after him. Hizui immediately stopped hesitating when he saw the effect. He swung the broad-edged long sword in his hand repeatedly, and streaks of flaming sword energy flew out, exploding into clouds of fire on the belly, wings, and other parts of the giant beast, leaving streaks behind. Burning wounds. At the same time, Heikawi shouted angrily at the flying giant beast, "Release Jingnan quickly. If she is injured, this angel will roast you alive with flame bombing." It was obvious that the flying giant beast couldn't understand it at all, and just kept making harsh and angry calls. The two were not on the same channel at all. At this moment, Jingnan, who was pinched between the claws of the giant beast, felt as if his sternum was broken into countless pieces. But thanks to the tough body and vitality of the second-generation angel, he did not die, but his vision was a little black. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 307. The giant beast seemed to be unable to endure Chui's provocation and attack any longer. It flapped its wings downwards and stopped flying forward. Instead, it raised its head and climbed hundreds of meters. The orbital module that had been pinched between its claws was also released. Come, including Jingnan. Hizui immediately rushed towards the falling Jingnan without even looking at the falling deformed airdrop pod. After the flying behemoth threw away the prey between its claws, its vertical pupils locked its sights firmly on Chui, and it turned over and swooped down from an altitude of more than 10,000 meters. Hizui naturally saw this scene, and was so anxious that he couldn't care about anything else. His whole body glowed with a faint glow, and his gene engine was fully activated. His speed suddenly increased. He hugged the falling Jingnan and jumped far away, and it happened to be at this time, the huge figure of the flying beast passed behind it, and the two women almost became its meal. "Hey Jingnan! Wake up! Are you okay? If something happens to you, how can I explain it to your queen?" Hizui looked at Jingnan, whose armor was deformed in his arms, and shouted in panic. Fortunately, Jingnan reacted. He suddenly opened his eyes, took a deep breath, and spoke weakly. "Don't worry, I won't die. It's just that my body has been severely damaged and I have temporarily lost my ability to move." Seeing this, Chui finally breathed a sigh of relief. Being unable to move was at least 1,000 times better than being dead. But soon, Jingnan's next words made Chui's expression brighten. "Can you not go? I want to send you to a safe place first. Although Jingnan was very weak at the moment, the words he spoke were very firm. I just saw that there are still surviving Kamigawa warriors in the airborne pod. Angels cannot ignore death, but we promised Texas to escort them to their destination. Hisui turned in an arc to avoid the flying giant beast chasing behind him, and at the same time protested towards Jingnan in his arms. That's what you promised. I didn't promise him. After finishing speaking, Hisui pursed his lips, was defeated in Jingnan's eyes, and said helplessly, I lost to you. You have definitely been brainwashed by your queen. As he spoke, Hisui immediately turned around. In fact, only a few seconds had passed since he rescued Jingnan. The airborne capsule in the distance has not yet fallen to the ground, but it is not far off. If there is no external force to stop it, it will definitely fall to pieces. At this moment, the airborne capsule, whose middle part was crushed by the flying giant beast, is spinning and falling diagonally towards the earth. At this moment, the 4 surviving Kamigawa blades in the cabin were extremely helpless. They could only hold on to fixed objects to stop them and were thrown out. They were just pseudo-second-generation super soldiers. If they fell from an altitude of nearly 10,000 meters, they would not be completely dead, but they would not be able to remain intact, so they could only pray that the airborne pod would not hit the mountain head-on. With Hichui's full strength, the flying giant beast following behind couldn't catch up at all. Soon Hichui carried Jingnan and flew to the side of the fallen airborne pod. He glanced at the environment below and saw a medium-sized lake on the ground to the left of the airborne cabin. So Heikawi immediately accelerated to the right side of the airborne capsule and kicked it on the spinning and falling airborne capsule, changing its trajectory in an unusually hard way. Hisui stepped down several times in succession, and finally corrected the direction of the airborne capsule's descent, changing its landing point to the medium-sized lake. But at this moment, the flying giant beast had also caught up, opened its sharp-hooked beak, and a string of liquid-like viscous flames spurted out from its throat, forming a long pillar of fire. Hisui held Jingnan in his arms with his left arm. He held a broad-bladed silver sword in his right hand and stepped back a short distance. He dodged the spray of sticky flames and said at the same time, If you have the ability, continue to chase this angel. I'll give you a taste of some sword energy first. After saying that, Hisui waved a few sword energy with one hand to attract the attention of the flying giant beast, then turned around and flew towards the direction he came from while holding Jingnan in his arms. The flying behemoth was filled with hatred by Hichui at this moment. He didn't care about the falling airborne capsule. Only Hichui's tiny back was in his sight, and he directly changed direction in the air and chased Hichui. As expected, the airborne capsule whose landing point was changed by Hisui's hardcore fell into the lake, splashing Laogao. If the Kamigawa warblade drowned because he couldn't swim, Hisui had nothing to do. Texas stretched out his foot and stepped on the body of the Tianding star that was almost split in half by him, and finally pulled out the battle axe embedded in the body. At this point, the 2 high-level beast warriors from the Tianding stars who attacked the Kamigawa warblade team were all wiped out, and the battle in the distance came to an end. After all, this group of beast warriors was only a small force. With the long-range fire support of the Kamigawa glaive team of all super warriors and 3 snipers, they quickly won the victory. Just when the Texas group was about to clean up the battlefield and head to the Black Smoke base, a sonic boom suddenly came from the sky, and then a figure landed on the ground at high speed from the sky, plowing out 2 tracks of several meters behind him. A long shallow ditch comes out. Seeing this, Texas hurriedly rushed forward to meet him, because the one who landed was Hisui, who was holding the unconscious Jingnan in his arms. I will leave Texas Jingnan to you first. Protect her for me. There is a big guy behind me that I need to deal with. As Hisui spoke, he put Jingnan into the arms of Texas, who was a little at a loss. Just as he was about to turn around, he suddenly turned back and warned. I'm warning you, don't even think about doing anything to the unconscious Jingnan, otherwise our angels will never let you go. After saying that, Chui turned around, slightly bent his knees and spread his wings, then brought up a burst of soil and flew into the sky. At this moment, a huge beast shadow flashed in the sky. This should be the big guy Chui said he needed to deal with. Before Texas could speak, Chui ran away, and Texas could only swallow all the words of rejection in his stomach. He lowered his head and looked at Jingnan in his arms, whose helmet had fallen off, revealing his delicate face and smooth black hair. He looked around and saw that it was not easy to hold him, so he found a relatively flat stone and gently put it down. After completing all the above, Texas finally let out a breath, called a soldier over, and pointed to Jingnan Road lying on the stone. "Does anyone in our team understand this?" What Texas said was so confusing that the soldiers who were called couldn't understand it at all. In the end, Texas could only speak more straightforwardly. "It's just that there are soldiers in the team who know how to treat. Let's check Miss Angel, that injury." At this moment, Jingnan opened his eyes slightly, coughed a few times, turned his face to the side, and a trace of bright red blood oozed from the corner of his mouth. "Where am I?" Texas listened to Jingnan's weak voice, which no longer contained the soft feminine charm of the previous conversation. This iron-blooded soldier was a little embarrassed when he spoke, but fortunately, this state only lasted for a second or two before Texas returned to normal and answered Jingnan's question. Then he spoke with concern. "Your armor is deformed. It looks like you're seriously injured. Is it all right?" Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 308. A pale smile appeared on Jingnan's somewhat pale face and she refused. "For our angel's body, conventional treatment methods are useless. We can only rely on natural healing or returning to the heavenly blade. I know the extent of my injuries myself, and I won't die for the time being, but my bones are damaged and I can't move for the time being, so I can only ask Texas to take care of you for the time being." Texas nodded quickly and said, "Don't worry, in the name of Kamigawa God of War, I will definitely protect you, Miss Jingnan." Kunta, who was in the Kamigawa base, heard the news that his subordinates had reported that the ambush had failed and that 2 of his personal guards had also joined him. He was so angry that he punched down the burning broken wall beside him. "Call Longton back to my general. We must wipe out all the Kamigawa warriors today. This time I will lead the team myself." Hizui, who was struggling with the flying giant beast, never found the opportunity to roast the giant beast with flame bombing. But suddenly, the flying giant beast that had been chasing Heikawi screamed, as if it had been summoned by something, and abandoned Heikawi and flew straight in one direction. Of course, Hizui didn't want to let the giant beast that hurt Jingnan leave, so he flapped his wings and chased after it. As time passed, Heikawi discovered that the giant beast was flying towards the Kamigawa base at the beginning. Confused, Hizui increased his flying height, hid himself above the high-altitude clouds and observed what was happening below. The next moment, he was shocked. The flying giant beast in sight landed in the center of the burning Kamigawa base. A strong beast warrior wearing silver-gray heavy armor jumped on its head, and some other ordinary beast warriors climbed on it. On its broad back. Then the flying behemoth raised its head and roared into the sky, flapped its wings and flew towards Texas, several hundred meters away from the base. Hizui screamed in his heart that something was wrong, and hurriedly swooped down. In fact, there was no need for Heikawi to remind him that Texas had already seen the flying behemoth descending towards the base in the sky. Texas, who had a bad feeling in his heart, immediately issued an order to hide all troops and wait for an opportunity to counterattack. But when the flying behemoth came over Texas and them, Texas discovered that he had made an extremely wrong decision. The viscous flames like liquid spurted out from the open beak of the flying giant beast, sweeping down like a waterfall composed of flames. The rocks that were used as shelter began to melt rapidly under the unusual flames. If this continued, there would be no place to hide. So Texas looked at the flying behemoth in the sky, and threw the tomahawk in his hand regardless of the high temperature and flames. Texas didn't even look at the result. The next moment, he put his hands on the ground and immediately protected the incapacitated Jingnan beside him, and then the orange flames burned the rocks and swept past. The protected Jingnan's eyes widened slightly. From her perspective at this moment, she could only see Texas's broad breastplate and chin with a light stubble. Apart from these, there was only the orange flames as the background color. As soon as the flames passed through Texas, he got up and asked Jingnan if he was okay, but Jingnan, who was in a daze, was stunned for a second before he responded and said it was okay. The flying behemoth that had been wreaking havoc in the sky was now lying on the ground whining. There was a big hole in the fleshy wing on the right side, which was pierced by the axe thrown by Texas. He breathed a sigh of relief after seeing that Jingnan next to Texas was safe and sound, and slowly landed in the air next to him. "Do you have any way to deal with that big guy with thick scalp and thick flesh? If not, you can hold it back. I'll prepare a flame bombing and I should be able to kill it with one blow." Texas didn't answer. He opened his palms slightly and moved them. He twisted his neck and moved forward while speaking. "No, you take care of your companion, and I will deal with it." Before he could say anything else, he was cut off by Texas' subsequent roar. "Because I am the god of war in Kamigawa." Texas has never been so angry at this moment. The team he leads is frequently attacked, but he has extremely powerful power, but he can't protect them from harm, so now he needs to vent. "That giant beast looks good." Texas' pace became faster and faster, and finally turned into a mad dash. When he was still nearly 200 meters away from the flying giant, Texas suddenly jumped forward into the air. Even if it falls to the ground, the giant beast that Kunta calls Longton is still very powerful. When Texas jumps towards it, Longton spits out its signature sticky flames from its upper and lower beaks. But the next moment, Texas, whose body was burning with flames, rushed out of the flames and hit the giant beast Longton's long beak hard with his right uppercut, knocking his head so hard that it almost hit the ground. Hizui, who was holding Jingnan up and half sitting up against the stone, said in surprise when he saw this scene. "This power is too terrifying." Jingnan didn't say anything, but quietly watched the scene of the Texas hammer beast. After the Texas hammer behemoth paused for a few times, a helmeted Tianding star rushed out from the side with a roar and slashed at Texas' head with a sword in his hand. Texas was so addicted to the punch that Wei Wei raised his left arm and punched straight away, knocking the Tianding star away on the spot. After a short period of venting the anger in Texas' heart, he raised his hand to recall the tomahawk he had thrown out and hold it in his hand. Then his legs were slightly bent, and the next moment the ground shook as he jumped hundreds of meters into the air. The large single-edged axe in his hand was raised high above his head, and the axe blade lit up with a dazzling orange light. "Hum me!" Along with Texas' roar that resounded across the sky, the seemingly small single-edged axe in his hand fell with Texas, creating a dazzling orange axe beam hundreds of meters high from top to bottom. The world seemed to be split in half at this moment, as if the scene of the first opening of heaven and earth was reflected in the eyes of all living creatures present. Not to mention the giant beast Long Dun, which turned into two symmetrical corpses on the spot. Texas, who landed on the ground again, turned around. Under the light, his figure appeared unusually tall and straight. Behind him, there was an endless ravine on the ground that was originally a plain and hilly area. Kunta, who had been punched away by Texas before, lost his fighting spirit when he saw this scene. He only had one thought in his mind: is this God? After losing the leadership of the general, Kamigawa soon took advantage of the planet Kaser. The beast-shaped civilization did not send follow-up support troops because there was a Kamigawa war god on this planet. Unless the Titan god they believe in is willing to come in person, no matter how much troops they invest, it will only be in vain, not to mention that this planet is still the god of war in Texas, the god of God who once killed the Titan god. However, Hizui and Jingnan did not participate in the war after Planet Kessa, because the combat data of the beast civilization had been collected almost after that battle. In addition, Jingnan was seriously injured, so he then took the Kamigawa warship back to the center of the Kamigawa system. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 309. This is the general situation we encountered during this trip. If there is nothing else, I will leave first, Queen. Hizui stood in the conference hall of Tianren and said to Binghua, who was sitting on the throne above. Because she failed to protect Jingnan, she was not in the mood to argue with Binghua now. Of course, Binghua could tell that something was wrong with Hichui's state, so he let her leave. Hichui was probably still brooding over Jingnan's injury, but Binghua did not blame Hichui because the battlefield itself was a place full of surprises. Binghua carefully reviewed the assessment of the combat effectiveness of ordinary beast civilizations in Crane Chui's report in his mind. Among them, the combat effectiveness of the soldiers of the Shima civilization, the soldiers of the Sabata civilization, and the Tianding people are not much different from the information provided by Kamigawa. However, the combat effectiveness of the giant beast civilization exceeded Binghua's expectations, because its huge size could even withstand the sword energy wielded by the elite angels. As for the special flame it sprays, Binghua speculates that it should be a biological fuel produced in the body of the giant beast. It will spontaneously ignite when it encounters gas, and the temperature is extremely high. The second generation angel warrior is okay, but if the first generation angel warrior is, contamination may be life-threatening. The other was the information about Texas, god of war in Kamigawa. This was something Binghua had not expected. Judging from the power and dark energy intensity of Texas's last blow, he had the ability to destroy the angel generation god's body with one blow. This result gave Binghua a sense of urgency. Angel's divine body technology should be improved as soon as possible, otherwise Angel would definitely suffer heavy losses in this war. Binghua thought deeply in Tianren and combined with the performance of the Shenhe civilization on Kaisar, he came to a very strange conclusion, that is, the Shenhe civilization has a certain advantage in the combat effectiveness of the middle and high level, but due to the number of reasons, this advantage is not obvious. Because in the battle against Texas on Kessa, as a god, he only brought 60 Kamigawa blades and 15 Kamigawa snipers, and the rest were ordinary Kamigawa soldiers. Among them, most of the Kamigawa glaive troops are mostly new recruits. They are all pseudo-second generation super warriors. They have the power close to the second generation super warriors, but do not have the anti-strike ability of the second generation warriors. Combined with the proposal from the last conversation that Texas was eager to join forces with the angel civilization to cut off the beast army's vanguard and carry out encirclement and annihilation, Hyoka felt that Kamigawa might be a little unable to hold on. Thinking of this, Binghua felt extremely bad, because this meant that the defense line of Shenhe civilization was very likely to collapse. If Kamigawa's defense line really collapses, it will be countless times more troublesome than it is now to fight against the attack of animal civilization. Thinking of this, Binghua felt the need to talk to Space about joint operations. The conversation between Hyowa and Space went very smoothly. Kamigawa was willing to form an elite coalition with the angels to break through the vanguard of the current animal civilization, enter its sphere of influence, and cut off its connection with the rear. On the angel side, Binghua personally leads the team, while on the Kamigawa side, they plan to dispatch 2 gods to ensure that everything is foolproof. Since it was an offensive blockade, Texas, god of war of Kamigawa, was of course indispensable, and the other one was Gun of Kamigawa, Niushue, both of whom were considered old acquaintances of Hyowa. This time Kamigawa also tightened his belt and mobilized 10,000 Kamigawa Warblade elites and 1,000 Kamigawa snipers, as well as 100 Kamigawa Dark Blade troops to accompany them. Then there are nearly 5 million ordinary Kamigawa warriors, and more than 1,000 warships of various types aboard them. On Angel's side, except for one Sky Blade that stayed behind, all the other Sky Blades accompanied them. Because Angel and Kamigawa had already reached an alliance, this joint attack on the Beast civilization was not widely publicized. After gathering their forces, they immediately set off towards the Beast front. At this moment, the battle lines between the Divine River and the Beast Body civilization are like two colliding lakes. Each side wants to devour the other and turn it into a part of itself. But because there is no qualitative difference in strength between the two sides, and the Kamigawa civilization still needs to deal with the triangular creatures, the front line of the beast-shaped civilization has been advancing at a very slow speed. And now the combined forces of the Angel Fleet and Hessian He civilization led by Binghua have carved a hole in the offensive line where the beasts are connected. Through this opening, Binghua led the Sky Blade battleship group and a large force of the Shenhe civilization into the sphere of influence of the Beast Body civilization. But after reaching the sphere of influence of the Beast Body, Binghua felt that he had underestimated the hostility of the Beast Body civilization towards the Shenhe Body civilization. Because everywhere they passed was scorched earth, not a single Divine River civilization could be seen, not even much animal civilization could be seen. Every planet where wars have occurred is devastated, with no intelligent creatures inhabiting it at all, not even traces of animal civilization. During the joint battle meeting, Binghua looked through the various materials projected in his hand, his eyebrows furrowed and his face no longer as calm as usual. Sitting in the conference room were Texas, Piexu, Amoran, and other high-level officials from the Shenhe civilization. Binghua turned off the projection, closed his eyes and was silent for a while before speaking. Are these things real? Why does the Beast Body civilization do this to exterminate the Divine River Body civilization? Texas said calmly, maybe we are afraid that we will become the ancient Kamigawa civilization that once drove them to remote corners. Texas then spoke again, we didn't know why the Beast Body civilization was so hostile to our Divine River Body civilization at the beginning. But no one will care about this kind of thing anymore. Now we are the only ones who live and they die. Or they live and we die. These two results. The same goes for triangular creatures, so this war can only end if two of the parties surrender completely. This meeting was just a small episode in this joint operation, but it made Binghua realize one thing clearly, that is, there will be no mercy in this war. The combined forces of the Angels and the Kamigawa civilization are like a virus that has entered the body of the beast, attacking the troops on the front line supported by the Beast civilization. Originally, this task was a bit difficult, but with the help of Angels with space combat capabilities, it became possible. As time went by, Binghua, Texas and other coalition forces became more and more destructive within the Beast Body's sphere of influence, and the Beast Body troops on the front line gradually felt the pressure. Due to problems with logistics and insufficient supply of troops, the offensive of the Beast Body civilization came to a standstill. It was not until the combined forces blocked the star field behind the Beast Army that the Beast Army on the front line lost contact with the base camp in the rear. The Beast Army finally showed its decline. The Kamigawa civilization took the opportunity to launch a large-scale counterattack. In addition, the Kamigawa army led by the Angel Fleet and Texas encircled and suppressed from the rear star field. In the end, the Beast forward was divided, surrounded, and annihilated. The Kamigawa civilization finally achieved a sizable victory. Super Seminary Angel Binghua. Author, Shifeng Si Wang. Chapter 310. After the Beast forward army was surrounded and annihilated by Kamigawa, they stopped sending more troops to the front. Other fronts also began to retreat. Kamigawa also had a tacit understanding and did not continue to advance the front. This is not the war of a pre-nuclear civilization where every inch of land is contested. In the interstellar era, Planets are not valuable unless they are of special significance and have a large number of inhabitants. Not to mention the vast starry sky, Kamigawa did not occupy the vacated star field in order to prevent his troops from being dispersed, but instead increased his defensive strength on the spot. At the same time, Kamigawa has stepped up recruitment efforts within his own jurisdiction, spending huge resources to cultivate more super soldiers, and even launched 2 new god-making projects. They are the God of the Fierce Sun and the Bow of the Sky. The reason why these 2 god-making projects were launched is to unite the internal unity of the Shenhe civilization and encourage various forces within the civilization to make greater contributions. The reason why these 2 god-making projects are not prefixed with the word Shenhe is because there are 2 civilizations that are currently contributing the most in the war with the beast body, namely the Shenhe Tiandao star and the Lance star. Because the living habits of the 2 planets are very different, the Kamigawa civilization used the super genes of the Kamigawa god of war and the Kamigawa gun as a template, and through strict debugging, it was tailor-made for the Kamigawa Tiandao planet and the Lance planet. 2 super genes with the potential to become gods. The only reason why the project was established was these 2 god-making projects. First, it is because the super genes of the Kamigawa civilization need to be applied to its soldiers from various planets, which requires complicated modifications and long-term debugging. Second, the super gene of the Kamigawa civilization itself is picky about its carriers, and the carriers of the god-making project are even more selective. There are often idle super genes, but there are no matching carriers. This has to be said to be a pity. Therefore, in recent years, the Kamigawa civilization has been modifying and debugging super genes, hoping to develop a super gene that can automatically adapt to the body of the bearer, so as to reduce the difficulty of finding the bearer of the super gene. However, Kamigawa has not invested much resources in this area at present, because the most important thing now is to win the war with beast body and triangular body creatures. As the first joint operation between Angel and Kamigawa came to an end, the 2 sides also learned more about each other during the war, especially the collision and blending of their respective cultures during the battle. Angels originally looked down upon the ordinary warriors of the Kamigawa civilization because they were weak and had only a mere 100 years to live. When ordinary Kamigawa warriors first met an angel, they were a little dissatisfied with the angel's superior and scrutinizing attitude. Sometimes they were beaten up by the angel because of their foul mouth, which dealt a huge blow to their self-esteem because they couldn't beat them. And because the angel was a woman, and because they all had superficial injuries, the high-level super warriors of the Kamigawa civilization were too embarrassed to stand up for their subordinates. But as the 2 sides fought together during the war, Angel saw the spirit of ordinary Kamigawa warriors who were not afraid of powerful enemies and the precious brotherhood on the battlefield. The Kamigawa warriors saw the Angel's powerful fighting power and fearless fighting spirit of life and death, as well as their slightly fanatical belief in their queen. During the period when the Kamigawa civilization was recuperating and reviving, Binghua sent what he saw and heard under the rule of the Beast Body civilization back to the Angel Nebula. In the middle, Kesha and Binghua also had a remote connection to communicate on this issue, and both sides had the same opinions. From the fact that the Beast Body civilization exterminated all the Kamigawa civilization under its rule, it can be seen that the Beast Body is extremely hostile to the Kamigawa civilization and has no idea of peaceful coexistence between the 2 sides. Therefore, the Angels and Kamigawa civilization must not lose this war. Even if the Angel civilization suffers huge losses, this war must be won. In this way, the future of Angels will be better, instead of being surrounded by animal civilization and unable to support themselves. In addition, Binghua also mentioned to Keisha the current situation faced by the Kamigawa civilization. Due to the special nature of the Kamigawa civilization, they have no resources and technology, but they are faced with the lack of suitable super gene carriers. Binghua believes that with Kesha's mind, she will be able to get a lot of resources from space, because Angel has no such concerns. Finally, there is a discussion between Hyoka and Keisha on the strategic direction of the current war between Kamigawa and the Beast Body. Do you have any good ideas? Facing Kesha's question, Binghua already had a plan in mind. I don't think the angels can form a joint force with the Kamigawa civilization. Through the coordinated operations some time ago, I found that this would lose a very important advantage of our angels. Kesha on the other side was just asking casually, but when she heard Binghua say this, she started to listen carefully. What advantage was sacrificed? Its combat flexibility. The reason why our angels are strong depends on our speed and destructive power. To put it simply, it is similar to the light cavalry troops of those cold weapon civilizations. Seeing that Kesha was thinking about Binghua, she paused for a while before speaking again. In the process of cooperating with the Kamigawa civilization, I found that our angel warriors were often accurately sniped by the beast civilization because they helped the Kamigawa people's ground troops. If we attack alone, this situation will not happen at all, because our angels are fast enough and can even conduct small-scale cosmic penetration operations. So I think we should fight separately with the troops of Kamigawa civilization if we conduct a joint attack next time. I believe that as long as we angels are given a goal and an independent front is formed, the results achieved by our angels will be much greater than those achieved through coordinated operations. Binghua said that she kept silent here because Kesha was not an idiot, and I believe she could figure out the difference. Because the two angels who are best at fighting in today's angel civilization, one is Angel Queen Kesha, and the other is Sky Sword King Binghua. However, there are some differences between the two, that is, they are good at different fields. Kesha is better at formulating general strategies and can often quickly find breakthroughs in extremely disadvantageous situations. Binghua is better at attacking stars than strategy. She is the kind who can fight to the end of the universe as long as she is given a direction and a powerful army. So when Binghua suggested that angels were not suitable for cooperating with the Kamigawa civilization and should set up an independent front on their own, Kesha, who was far away in Tiancheng, had an idea in her mind. Binghua, you are right. Due to cultural and personal reasons, we angels do not pay attention to ground combat. Although synergy with Kamigawa will make up for our disadvantages in this area, it will also drag us down at the same time. Because the doves, a ferocious beast, have a home, they are no longer a threat, because they will return home sooner or later. As long as the hunter sets a trap on the only way he must pass, he will definitely have a good harvest. Binghua agreed with Kesha's words. It's pretty much what I thought. The Queen hopes that you can explain this to them when negotiating with the Kamigawa civilization.